Moriden Athluan.
The champion of Kinneret. Moriden showed the beauty of nature by finding renewal for the great and glorious Gildergreen of Whiterun, providing a place of worship for all manner of men and mer.
The champion of Daibella, the only man to enter the most sacred places of the temple in Markat and live. He, who found out the Daibellian symbol and returned her to the temple, so that all could hear the will of the great goddess.
The messenger of Mara, whose small words and influence sparked two of the greatest love stories of all time in Skyrim.
Moriden was at the height of his goodly deeds when word reached him of a new threat to Skyrim and its people.
Like the mighty champion of the people he had become, he looked up to the role of the people's champion once again and set off to destroy the vampire threat.
Come closer and hear the story of how he destroyed one of the oldest threats to
Still
man
searching
and
for stories about me, I see. I hate to disappoint you, but this portion of my story, you won't find a single bard who knows what he's talking about. That's fine now. We have time, my friend. I can tell it far better than they can, as they tell it for entertainment, not because it is truth. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Sons Dusk, 4th Era, 201. I had expected that, given her cultists had been seeking me out and attacking me, that I would face similar when I finally ascended to her Sacellum. I was fully prepared for that eventuality. It didn't happen. Instead, I was greeted by a woman who would be insulted to be called a priestess, yet for whom no other title or description applies. In her eyes, and in the eyes of their lord, my survival meant nothing other than that those who sought to drag me down failed. It meant they were weak, and I was strong. Given this is almost exactly what Lord Baal had said of me recently, I can see why the two are rivals. They both seek the same kind of followers. However, there is one difference that the Lord of Plots has that makes her somewhat more appealing to me. She cares only for those who care about themselves. Since this is almost the same lesson I have seen the world teach me over and over again, I can relate. So if I am to draw her attention, I am to first wield a lie and get someone who trusts me to follow me here so that I can kill them as a sacrifice. I care for nobody in the world, really. A mercenary will likely do the job, perhaps one from Windhelm itself. If I have to sacrifice someone else to gain something of worth, then why not one of those who turned their backs on me all my life? I had to wait several hours at the candle hearth before a suitable mercenary presented himself. I keep forgetting that the mortals still are subject to a need for sleep. That was a habit I broke almost instantly. Such a waste of time. Stenvar was known to me, though not I to him. He is an Eastmarch native. Unsure if he's from Windhelm itself originally, but anywhere in Eastmarch is close enough for me and my purposes. He didn't have much use for beggars, and he considered anyone from the Grey Quarter to be one by default. So more than good enough. Mercenaries are pretty straightforward, which I know from personal experience, of course. Promise to pay, and they will trust you. The base idea is that you need them alive to keep you alive. That, however, doesn't work in my case. Not that he knows that. He'll find out differently, of course, but by then it will be far too late. Knowing Boethiah, though, there will be more to this. The book, Boethiah's Proving, makes a strong case for the need to kill others to prove your existence. Not just one kill for the sport of it, so to speak. To killing to exist. Once Stenvar is dead, I would be shocked if there is not a further trial, likely something combat-related. That means not going up during daylight. I will wait until dusk when my powers return and I can respond to force with force of my own. That is not to say that I would remain in Windhelm and waste time. Naturally not. Indeed, having something to do was critical to keeping Stenvar blissfully unaware of his coming fate. I used the need to fight giants at Stonehill Bluff and finding the ground mammoth tusk as the initial reason. That kept him thinking I was using him for a short time only as well, so not worth making a huge deal of when we left. A quick in and out, a bunch of gold in his pockets, and he'd be back by tomorrow. I also told him that the last thing I needed was snow from a mountain not far from Windhelm, close enough to the truth to be believable. By the time we get back, it will be just short of dusk, setting up the timing I believe I will need to deal with more of Boethiah's cultists, I'm sure. Stenvar has no idea what lies in wait, and indeed has asked no questions of me at all. Trusting at this level is simply stupid. And as any legionnaire can tell you, however, the stupid shall be punished. Though I had not planned on it, the arrival of a dragon made the arrangement between myself and Stenvar even more legitimate seeming. The beast arrived as we descended into Anger's Mill, heading back towards Windhelm. It was making a right mess of the place until we arrived. I have to give credit where it's due. Stenvar is a good warrior, or at least he knows how to use that weapon of his. A good warrior also thinks. And perhaps in battle he does, but in other areas of his life I would say it was clear that he does not. Regardless, the dragon fell after some bit of fighting. The non-home structures of the village may take a few days to repair and scrub clean of the soot and burnt portions, but it will survive. The locals were smart enough to get to cover when the thing roared its arrival. This did mean that Stenvar now knows who I am. But since we won't be stopping in Windhelm and giving him a chance to talk about me and his being hired on, nobody will tie his disappearance to me either. A small risk. But in this case it was an unavoidable one. Now he's excited to be able to talk about spending time with me when the job is done. It's almost cute how he's giggling over the circumstances. Though I arrived slightly sooner than I expected to, I could not put off the climb to the top of the mountain path. When we reached the top and Stenvar saw the entire encampment, I could see the beginnings of doubt in his eyes, but he held his misgivings. This proved to be his second to last mistake. The last was when he followed my direction to touch a small pillar in front of the giant statue of Boethiah. It really was something he obviously should not have done, but trust. It's such a two-edged blade. When I plunged the blade of sacrifice into his chest and he died near instantly, the ground lurched. A moment later and Stenvar was standing before me, but it was not his voice I heard. Instead, once again, I heard the ringing voice of a Daedric lord, though this time aloud and not simply in my head. She first questioned while I did it, and I told her that I was sick of her interference. I'd killed dozens of her cultists by this point, and I was done with them. I summoned up all of my courage and basically told her to knock it off. She paused and then chuckled. "Perhaps you are the one I seek," she said, as if to herself, and then, as I knew it somehow would, she ordered everyone present to kill everyone else. Last Mer standing would gain her favor and a mission of importance to her. The result was never in doubt. These cultists had spent all of their time in this place sparring. They knew how to fight in a way that was almost ritual, but they did not know true combat. Not as I did. In combat, you never give an enemy a break. You never act as they expect. The last thing they expected here was a vampire lord, so that, then, is what they got. The slaughter was over too quickly, really. But it gave Boethiah pause as well. When she spoke again, it was through the remains of her former priestess. I had proven my skill with lies, my strength of will, my prowess in combat. She wondered if I could cast aside my honor and strike with a hidden blade, and I wondered if she had been paying attention to me or not. I was a beggar. I had no honor. What honor I had among the legions was cast aside when they cast me aside. I would sooner kill from silence and stealth than any other way. This test would be no test at all, I told her. And she laughed. At Knife Point Ridge in Falkreath, her current champion lives like a self-styled king among bandits. This is not pleasing to her. So I am to kill him and all of his followers. I am also to do so from stealth, giving them no chance to defend themselves, for this was not about me. I would be but the instrument of another's will. And when he was dead, her ebony mail would be mine to use as I wish. As to being chased by her cultists, she told me these had been the last ones in Skyrim apart from those I was about to slay. Fair enough. I wasn't sure I'd be able to kill a Daedric lord anyhow, but I was certainly willing to try. Just as well I wouldn't have to. Assuming she is truthful, which she likely is not, I would almost wager that once she has rebuilt her numbers here, I will be target 1 on her list. Exciting times. I considered my options. Though I am bound currently towards Falkreath and Knife Point Ridge, I must also consider my other tasks and missions. I have one of the 2 Elder Scrolls in my possession. The second, Lord Harkham will be patient about, given that he hasn't been able to find the thing, or the wife who stole it, in several thousand years. A few days more delay will be all but unnoticeable. Apart from Boethiah, then, that leaves mostly the Aetherium business with Aedra, which I am now in a better position to deal with. So using the map her journal contained, I went searching for the third site. It was laughably obvious when I saw it. A storeroom from a nearby city. Aedra was already present, as were a small horde of spiders, which I flamed from existence in short order. After clearing out all the ore, including a large amount of a glowing blue rock that might be the ore form of Aetherium, we found the third piece of the key quickly. Like the other 2, it had been all but displayed. This leaves one more, plus the location of the forge itself, to figure out. Looking at the notes, and assuming that she's right about the 5th location being the forge itself, then the last piece... well, it's likely Raldbathar, which is somewhat embarrassing since I was near that place not too long ago. I said embarrassed, but really I shouldn't have been. I'd found a lift from Blackreach and then seen a dragon circling just outside. Why should I be embarrassed to say that I stuck to my mission of the time, not fought a dragon when I didn't need to, and didn't look around a ruin that had no relevance to me at the time? Now, of course, it was different. I had business here, on this mountainside, and I could see the bandits on the walkways and stairways keeping their watch. They were going to see something tonight. Something that would strike terror into their hearts. And then... they would feel nothing at all. Though I felt no regret at slaughtering the bandits I was facing, when I reached the first main room of the ruin, I suddenly paused. There were only 3 bandits there, as best I could tell, and with vampire senses, that instinct was going to be correct. Minus the possibility of necromancy or Dwemer constructs. 3 would be simple, and yet, as I was lining up my shot, I could have sworn I heard a voice. A soft whisper. Sibilant. Barely noticeable at all, but it was there. I could feel it if I listened closely enough. It said only 2 words. Not yet. I don't know how I knew what the voice meant. I'm not even sure why I lowered my bow and snuck around them, instead of killing them when I had the advantage. I just did. I chose at the time to ignore the way I simply did what this voice told me. Either I will learn the meaning of this in time, or my tally of kills will be 3 shorter. 3 really isn't enough to worry over, yet I still wonder why I stayed my hand. The 2 pieces of the key I retrieved after Arkanthang's had been in the open, easy to access. As I kept going and saw no hint that Aetherium was ever known to this city, I had to question myself. Was the key shard here, or was I wasting my time? This became even more of a question when I entered a new area of the ruin and encountered the inevitable. The Falmer. This would be a lot of work for potentially nothing. I pulled out the 3 pieces I had so far and studied them for a moment. Was this forge, whatever it was, even worth my time? Just because the Dwemer had fought a war over it didn't mean that I would be able to do anything with the materials themselves if I found it. My skills at the forge are better than they once were, but would this Aetherium not require a master's level of skills? I had almost convinced myself to turn around when I noticed that there was a subtle pulling from the 3 shards, all of them tugging my hand ever so slightly in the same direction. Like calling to like. I was suddenly certain that I had been correct. The other shard was here. All it would take was a bloodbath of Falmer blood to retrieve it. So be it. 17 Suns Dusk, 4th Era, 201. There are times the Dwemer are sly and crafty in their construction and traps. I can say this safely, I think, having almost fallen to my death in Kagranzel. This trap, however, was not one of them. It was obvious, it was straightforward, and it was still deadly. 4 buttons, one of which opens the way forward, and nothing to tell one from the others. Step 1. Locate the actual trap itself. In this case, a series of flame jets built into the wall opposite the buttons. Step 2. Study the trap. In examining the setup, I located 2, possibly 3 places one could stand where, though one would be uncomfortably close to the flames, one would not be hit by them directly. Thus, though you might get singed, you would survive it. Step 3. Trigger the trap. It was on the 2nd button. The 3rd I chose opened the gate. The following room gave me a feeling of dread. Not because of the Falmer or their Charis, but because after those had all been dispatched, there was still an infernal noise coming from various places in the room. Tracing them down wasn't hard. The gears and the items obstructing them were all openly visible. As I was removing the 2nd one, though, I began to ask myself why these gears were fouled, and, from what I could tell, purposefully. It wasn't until the 4th one had been removed and I pressed a button to lower a bridge that an answer occurred to me. By then, of course, it was far too late to stop it. Imagine a Dwemer Centurion. If you haven't seen one, just imagine a very large machine that looks something like a person, but far angrier and less reasonable. This, I realized, is what I would have left here to defend this city were I a Dwemer. This, it turned out, was exactly what came stomping at me across the bridge when I lowered it. Fortunately, my trick with the lockpick is repeatable. Now, imagine you see this Centurion on the bridge suddenly locked into place and then slowly tumbling over to splash down into the pool beneath you. Feel that relief? Good, because that's exactly what I felt in that moment. When I got past where it fell over and pressed further on into the ruin, I recognized the setup. Table in the middle, slabs radiating out from it, and a round indentation, exactly the same setup as Alfdend. And when I put the tuning sphere in the machine, the same result. I had just found another way into Blackreach, should I ever feel the need to do so again for some strange reason. But the real prize, the reason I was here, was in the next room, with Katria already staring at it. The final piece of the key to the forge was there, on display, along with even more of the ore material I had seen at all 4 locations now, almost certainly the Aetherium this key is made from. Katria was beside herself. She all but ran for the room, heading for the forge, I imagine, before I even had the thing in hand. The 4 pieces snapped together on their own, when I placed the other 3 pieces near the last. There wasn't even a line to show the break, and try as I might, I couldn't pull them back apart, which makes me wonder how they were separated to begin with. I continue to doubt that I have the skills needed to make use of this material, but, well, maybe this is Katria's excitement talking and not my own, but to have found this place, something that nobody has seen since the Dwemer vanished, would this not add to the legend of the Dragonborn? Imagine the display that Aryan could make. The final place in Katria's notes, and thus the location of the forge most likely, is in the Rift, not far from Iverstead. Along that path I was able to stop at the Sarethi farm, the home of the dead alchemist I'd found in Blackreach, and the reason I had gathered as many of the strange red Nirn roots as I could. The matron of the farm was grateful for it, looking forward to taking up the torch on this research. It will be some time, perhaps never, really, before anything comes of it, but I simply do not have the time to go any further into this. I am not certain I've mentioned the place before, but I had a good idea of where to look for the forge entrance. During my time in the Legion, when we'd been working in the Rift, there was a lot of talk about a strange-looking statue not far from the camp. Some of the stairways and platforms nearby looked Dwemer, but there was no city, no ruins, or anything else, just the statue. There had been lots of debates, idle ones, about what it was or what it was for. I think I know exactly what it's for. When I arrived and found Katria's there as well, I was relatively certain I was correct. The statue had, in its top, a recess that fit the key perfectly. Putting it in the slot did nothing, really, apart from a small click. When nothing else happened, I removed the key, to find it had become part of a gear-like portion of the statue coming out in a single piece. Then the rumbling started. The entire platform we stood on shook. I didn't need Katria's order to get clear, I was already moving. When the rumbling stopped, a giant opening had appeared, and there was a lift that led downwards. I looked at the spirit, and as one we stepped on board, and I pulled the lever. The ride down was the longest one I have ever done on a Dwemer lift. I have no idea how far down we've actually gone, but this may rival or even surpass the depths of Blackreach. Though the massive tower braziers lit as we moved along the path, there is no other indication that anything living has been here, in centuries at least. That doesn't mean there won't be threats. I'm expecting Centurions at the least. But I don't expect those threats to be living ones. Despite that, I maintained measured caution as we moved along the path. The path continued downward, the air growing hotter and drier as we did. There was a smell to it as well, one that I almost knew but couldn't quite put a name to. When we started down the final descent and saw the room open up ahead of us, neither of us had words. The steam from the room partially obscured sight, but the huge structure at the far end and the massive pool of magma that it sat above were very hard to miss. This, then, is the Aetherium Forge, a metal and a place that 4 major cities of Dwemer fought and died for control over 4,000 years ago and more. We are the first to see it. Well, I am the first to see it. Technically, Aetherium is dead and doesn't count for this. Not that I could see over much anyhow because of the steam. At Aetherium's urging, I turned off 2 valves on the upper galleries to try to get the steam to die down. It did, but it also told the local defenders we were here. Spiders. Spheres. Worker machines. The only thing I didn't kill in the next 5 minutes was a centurion, which I found very surprising. That didn't make it any easier, however, as sheer numbers can sometimes overwhelm single powerful beings. Like myself and Aetherium, in this case. We persevered and survived, and we had thought it over. Until a single powerful being emerged from the lava itself, a centurion bigger and nastier than either of us had ever encountered. Aetherium, though dead, shivered with a momentary expression of fear. As for me, I had a trick up my sleeves. It was bigger than a standard centurion. It was more heavily built than a standard centurion. It, given time, would likely hurt far more than a standard centurion. For all of that, however, it was still a centurion, and my lockpick trick would, likely, still work. And if it didn't, well, if it didn't, then there was a good chance I would join Aetherium in a state of ghosthood. The trick, however, worked, and with almost no effort at all, the centurion toppled to the ground, frozen and broken. The forge was now ours to use, but given how little Aetherium we had available to us, as I had sent most of it ahead to the museum, an oversight on my part, we realized we really had only one viable source left, the key itself. I, would have just enough to make a single item, something to prove that not only had we found the forge, but that it worked. I thought about it for a few moments. My skills with the forge are not exactly what a professional smith would call impressive. But I put what skills I had to the matter, and after melting down the metal into a more malleable form, I slowly started reshaping it, molding it. In time, I created what I will bill as an ethereal crown, a lone, for the moment, testament to a metal that started wars, ended futures, and is all but forgotten. The proof is mine, and with that proof now created, Aetherium will fade to nothing, having only had enough time to thank me for her release from Mundus. Aetherium was a likable sort, I must admit. I hope one day to meet her apprentice, the man who stole her work, so I can thank him properly for putting me on this path. I think a short, sharp stab to the eyeballs will suffice. My intention was a brief stop in Falkreath to send another shipment to the museum, which I really need to visit again soon, as these shipments must be piling up. But that was not to be. The Jarl has been looking for me, it seems, and when I was on the steps of Dead Man's Drink, I was approached by a guard and told I had been summoned to see him. I considered ignoring the summons, but after a moment, agreed. For the moment, there's no reason not to pretend I'm still just a normal mortal who cares about the local politics in some fashion. Plus, I am still a noble of Whiterun, and I have enough respect for Jarl Balgruuf that I wouldn't want my actions to reflect badly on him. The discussion was a brief one, as I expected. The Jarl had not summoned me for my sparkling conversation. He has a problem that he wants solved, and I am the way he plans to solve it. This is no Markarth or Riften, but even here in a small, out-of-the-way city that fancies itself a capital, there is corruption. The Jarl has had dealings with a local bandit clan, his lack of action in return for a cut of the profits. Now that they've cut him out of those profits, he's decided to renegotiate the deal. I'm being sent to wipe them all out. It's on the way to knife point, and I could always use more food. A quick ride, and I began my approach to Bannermist Tower, home of the Jarl's former business partners. The Jarl might be smacking himself when I tell him of the events here, as he will still have to pay me for something that would have happened anyhow. The bandits were all killed in a dragon attack just as I was arriving. Makes my job so much easier. Well, minus having to kill the dragon, of course, but there was enough terrain and whatnot to use as cover that killing it was a matter of time, not skill. I wonder what the Jarl is going to offer me to keep my mouth shut about his arrangement, or if the idea that I could blackmail him over this has even occurred to him yet. Knife Point Ridge would be a more difficult prospect. The bandits were numerous and well dug in, and if Boethiah's current champion is their leader, then I would expect skill from them. Why would he saddle himself with this many, however, is beyond me. That means caring about them at some level, and Boethiah's teachings are more about taking care of only oneself. Which may be exactly why I've been sent to remove him from both positions. While Boethiah's instructions were clear, to kill them all from stealth, the exterior layout did not allow for that option. They are all dead, most of them taken unaware, but it was inevitable that at least a few would become aware of what was happening. Once I step inside that cave, however, there can be no mistakes. I will be the instrument of her will in this. Mine is not the hand that kills them. I am the arrow that she has let loose. It did not take long to see why this band is so successful, and why they are willing to follow. This cave is a mine, just full of metals that can be smelted and either used or sold. The former allows for them to be better armed and armored. The latter allows them to wallow in the money that they get for it. I'm thinking this bandit clan may have been almost formed by accident. The champion finds the place, forces a few to mine it for him. He hires a few more to guard the workers, but has to cut them in on the profits. More laborers needed to get more metal to supply the pay for the guards, and so on, until suddenly he's living in the lap of bandit luxury. I almost feel bad for him.